Good evening all. Please take your seats. Just to remind members that this meeting may be filmed. Item 2, apologies for absence. Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Stone, Chanot, Das Neves, Ogiahor, Jogi and Tabwa.
I'm sorry, I've just recently been advised that Councillor Ruth Gordon is unwell, so she won't be here this evening, so I'd like to give her apologies as well. Thank you.
Item 3, any later urgent business? Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, there are 2 late items of business which could not be available earlier and which will need to be dealt with at this meeting. Item 7, urgency report detailing a change in membership to an outside body, which was agreed on the 14th of March to allow Councillor Mitchell to participate in the Wood Green Urban District charity. And item 12, questions and written answers. The reason for lateness is that notice of questions is not requested until 8 clear days before the meeting, following which the matters raised have to be researched and replies prepared to be given at the meeting.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. We don't seem to have any. Thank you very much. Item 5, Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, I would ask the Council to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February.
Thank you. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. Item 6. I will draw your members' attention to the table papers outlining my recent engagements. Following the terrible attack on Muslims in New Zealand last week, I want to repeat Haringey's message to the people of Christchurch. We stand with you. There is no room to hate in our borough, in London or in the world. There have been vigils and gatherings in North London this weekend, and our community, people of all faiths and none has come together to show unity. Our diversity is something that we celebrate and we're very proud of. I want to send Haringey's condolences to all those affected. I refer to the Leader of the Council who would like to say a few words. Leader?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. It has been raised with me whether or not we as a borough should have a book of condolence for the victims in Christchurch. I'd like to think this is something that we will be able to do, and if I can pass this on to the appropriate authorities to ensure that that's possible, please. It falls to me this evening, as Leader of Haringey Council, to speak not just on behalf of the 50 or so councillors who are here this evening in this chamber, but also on behalf of the 250,000 people in Haringey. This weekend, the people of Haringey have been standing alongside the people of Christchurch. The murder of 50 people whilst they were peacefully at prayer is a shameful terrorist act. And speaking here tonight about this fills me with sadness. We, as a borough, we offer our condolences and our support to the people and the families affected. and we also offer our friendship. However, the fact that this terrorist act has had the effect of bringing people together around the world is the one positive thing that comes from it. We hope that these new bonds and friendships will prove enduring and defeat the haters. Haringey is a socially diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-faith borough, both confident in and proud of its differences and capable of expressing and espousing its similarities. This expression of our tolerance and respect for each other highlights the social, ethnic and religious diversity of which we are so proud. The goal of the Christchurch terrorist was to get settled communities like our own to divide and fight amongst ourselves. It aimed to set Muslim against Christian against Jew. It aimed to set black against white. Here, he has failed. But I'm saddened that this hateful act has emboldened some white racists on the street of Britain and encouraged a Muslim to take revenge on the streets of Utrecht. We cannot, we must not allow hate to beget hate. All too often where politicians speak about racism, they equivocate. When they talk about bringing people together, they dissemble. As I look around this chamber here today, I am clear that none of these politicians are here today. The Christchurch terrorists wanted to spread hate and division, but that won't happen in Haringey, because this is not who we are. He wanted to cleave friend from neighbour, from work colleague, from partner. But this won't work here in Haringey, because this is not who we are. We are a committed, cohesive, connected community, clear in our expression to the world that an attack on any one of us is an attack on every one of us. Tonight we need to share our strength with the people of Christchurch. Haringey says we stand alongside you in your moment of sadness. We also need to share our strength with the Muslim, Jewish and Christian communities at home and abroad who suffer hate and persecution just because of who they are. Haringey stands up against racism wherever it rears its ugly head. I hope today, Madam Mayor, we'll be able to have a minute's silence for the people who have lost their lives through racist attacks. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Please, can we now stand in 1 minute silence? Before we move on, I'd like to say I'm not quite sure whatever we have tonight with us, young people with autism or not, but just in case we do have, can I advise members that people with autism, they find the sudden sound or clapping sometimes upsets them. So if you do wish to clap, instead of clapping, what you do is this. You show your appreciation by doing this. It'd be helpful if you remember that. Thank you very much. Can we move to item 7, Chief Executive?
May I draw members' attention to the outline municipal calendar for 2019-20, which is also available online. Please can we also note the urgent action taken with the Mayor to appoint Councillor Mitchell to the Wood Green Urban District Charity.
Thank you. Item 8, the Deputy Monitor Officer.
Madam Mayor, I have no matters to report.
Thank you. Item 9. I had accepted 2 deputations for this evening's meeting. I will take these in the order that they were received, starting with the deputation from Mr. Quentin, given on climate emergency, who will have 5 minutes to introduce his deputation. I would then ask members to put forward questions, but we have decided for tonight's meeting not to use questions because we have a packed agenda, so forgive me for that. So, when you're ready, Mr. Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Quentin Given from Friends of the Earth and students from Woodside High School tonight. So we're asking you to declare a climate emergency. What does that mean? Firstly, it means that we're faced with a threat to our civilization and indeed to our very survival as a species, not to mention the rest of life on our planet. Secondly, this threat is an urgent one. We have a very limited and rapidly closing window of opportunity to avert the worst catastrophes. The United Nations, for example, said last October that we have just 12 years to massively reduce carbon emissions across the whole world. So we very much welcome the motion that's on your agenda tonight. We welcome the fact that Haringey does have plans to cut carbon. We join you in calling on the government to provide the tools to enable that to happen and in sending a strong message to government and our elected representatives that we can no longer support high carbon infrastructure like new roads or airport expansion. The emergency isn't even just about climate, but also we're seeing the collapse of insect and other wildlife across the world, plastic pollution that has now reached every ecosystem in every corner of our world. But there is hope, and we saw that on Friday in the magnificent strike across the world, the Strike for Climate, by over 1 million school students in over 100 countries. We hope you do prioritise the motion so it gets adopted tonight and enacted afterwards. And that's all from me, because it's far more important that you hear from the young people tonight whose lives will be dominated by this issue.
Good evening. We are members of Woodside High School's Environment Club, and we're here to address the issues concerning our environment.
As this Earth progresses, the temperature rises with it. However, all of this can be stopped if we act now, and the first step is to call a climate emergency. This will be beneficial to our generation and future generations. People around the world are being harmed by the effects of climate change already. We have already caused irreversible damage, but it is not too late to make a difference.
Plastic is a major concern in the modern world. Around the globe, millions of plastics are being used daily. And where does it end up? In the sea. Not only are we contaminating our sea and our oceans with bottles, bags, and even straws, which are all made from plastics, we are harming marine life, killing them with small molecules of this devastating substance. Through biomagnification, plastics are increasingly going to end up in humans, causing health problems. Not only are we destroying our environment, but we are destroying ourselves. If Kenya can completely ban plastics, then why can't we?
It's not too late to act, to be part of the solution. There are many ways to get involved. This can be as simple as supporting campaigns that support the environment to making the key decisions that will help save our dying planet. We don't want to miss school and our lessons to protect. We want the adults to make the right choices now and for future generations. We urge you, the Council, to take urgent action on climate change. We need to act globally and nationally, but we can also make a difference locally in Haringey. Thank you for allowing us to come here today and giving us the opportunity to speak about matters that will affect our future. For our sake and for the sake of the future generations, please declare a climate emergency and take immediate action.
Thank you so much. You should feel very proud of yourselves. You certainly done us very proud. Thank you. You're a good example of our young people in our borough. Well done. Thank you very much. And this is a way of thanking you. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Environment to respond, please.
Thank you so much. You saw probably there an unusual way of responding to you, and I think you gave us a great example of making a point and being brief. And I really hope the rest of us this evening will follow that, actually. I thought it was magnificent. Well done. You know I always do, right? At the beginning of this new council, I specifically asked to have the brief for environment because I wanted very much to do what I could to make the council make a difference. As an environmentalist activist myself for many years in different places, from Green and Common to issues around fracking, I feel it's very important that we stop what we're doing and we turn around and do something different. I'm ashamed of my generation. I'm an old bat, and I'm really ashamed of my generation because I think we've been sitting in the corner with our fingers in our ears humming, going, I can't hear it, I can't hear it, I can't hear it, as we guzzle in our gas-guzzling cars. Well, I thank you tonight for your presentation. We do have a motion on the agenda tonight. I am hoping, I believe it will happen, that we will declare a climate change emergency tonight, and we will have an action plan that we develop to make sure that we keep doing what we're currently doing, but doing more of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I call on Mrs. Rachel Bailey, who is also joined by parents from Lordship Lane School. When you're ready. Thank you. You got up to 5 minutes.
Right. Thank you. We're actually from Coleridge School.
And St Mary's.
Oh, okay. So, as parents, we've always felt a pang of guilt about bringing up our children in the city. Air pollution and the fear of its effects have always been something of a black cloud hanging over our attempts to do the best we can by these young people that we are lucky enough to be responsible for. In recent months, our sense of guilt and fear has grown dramatically. As more media attention is shone on the issue and more scientific evidence has come to light, the threat of air pollution has developed from a vague concern of ours to a clear and substantiated health threat. All of our children attend Coleridge Primary School and other local schools. Our school, in particular, Coleridge, is acutely affected by the blight of car emissions through having a busy main road run right through the centre of the two sides of our school. As we walk to and from school on a daily basis, our children comment on the horrible smell and even taste of the traffic fumes. Our sheer panic and guilt continues to grow. Just recently, numerous reputable studies about air pollutants are being splashed across the mainstream media. This is no longer an academic secret. We are all now painfully aware of what we are exposing our children to, and thus, in our opinion, now collectively responsible for taking urgent action. In particular, two key elements of the studies have truly shaken us. Firstly, that many of the associated health risks we are all being exposed to could be permanent. And secondly, and most tragically, that our children are the ones most susceptible to the effects. How can we possibly live with ourselves knowing that we are starting these young people up with such a potentially serious disadvantage, a future filled with pre-written health problems before they've even begun? A number of key initiatives by the Mayor of London himself and also by other local boroughs have begun to address the problem. They've shown that there is willingness to listen and, more crucially, to act to protect our children before our worst fears are realised. Now, as parents, as local school communities and as a borough as a whole, we implore you not to turn a blind eye to this problem, but to join the growing number of progressive councils who are willing to help us protect our children and continue to enjoy everything that Haringey and London as a whole can offer without the black cloud of doubt and air pollution hanging over us. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the Cabinet Member for Environment to respond to the deputation.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I met some of the students from Coleridge School when we were unwrapping things in Crouch End last week. And I'm really pleased to see that Coleridge School actually takes a leadership on all these issues, which is really good. Yes, we have a motion and an amendment on the agenda tonight, which we hope we're going to get to as well, which will actually put forward some action that we intend to take. It is shocking to me when I walk down the road, in fact, past your school, actually, just how much the fumes affect us all. And I'm a bit taller than most of the children who go there, who are much closer to the exhaust pipes than I am. But it is pretty awful, and it is blighting children's lives. And so we know, and we are intending to do what we can to make a difference to this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the deputation for coming here tonight, and please stay with us. You can move to the gallery if you wish. Thank you very much again. Now we come to item 10. We have 3 reports before us this evening. First, can I call on the chair of the Standards Committee, Councillor Obugo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, colleagues. The Members' Allowance Scheme is something that the Council has to revoke and renew on an annual basis. I'm pleased to announce that one of the recommendations made by the Standards Committee is to ask the Council to formally adopt a parental leave and sick leave policy for councillors. Some of you may be aware of that there's been a national campaign encouraging councillors and MPs to adopt the baby leave policy, which is often referred to. And Parliament adopted this policy in January this year, and if agreed by colleagues this evening, Haringey Council will become one of around 9 London councils to adopt the policy, and around one of 17 council or district councils nationally to adopt the policy. So I hope you can approve that recommendation. But additionally, in removing the report, I wanted to clarify that the 2% uplift that the Standards Committee is recommending is only applies to the basic allowance and not to the SRAs in general. And so with a 2% uplift, that makes it £216 in additional allowance for councillors, and that would be $12,313 as the 2% uplift. So if that's said, colleagues, I move the recommendations as set out in the Standards Committee report.
We have received 2 proposed amendments to the recommendations of this report, which, in accordance with the Council Procedure Rules, we will consider the first amendment received, which is from the Labour Group, and then we vote on this amendment. Before voting on the substantive recommendations, we will consider the second amendment put forward by the Liberal Democrat Group and proceed to vote on this amendment and their substantive recommendations. I call on Councillor Bull to put forward your amendment.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to formally move amendment to recommendation 2, and for the avoidance of doubt, as follows. Approve the new Members' Allowance Scheme for 2019-20 as set in Appendix A of the attached report, subject to the removal of Band 1A, 2 or fewer Assistant Cabinet Members SRA from 5, Table A, to take effect from the 1st of April 2019. I'd like to move that amendment, please.
And this, the seconded is by Councillor Shatwanti. So, I'm terrible with names, you know that. Yeah. Please.
I'm allowed to say a few words? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. So I am seconding this amendment because I believe that if we are serious about involving working class people, especially working class women in politics, then we must ensure remuneration. If not, only those that can afford to will be in positions of responsibility in politics. And for me, that promotes elitism. I am one of the 2 deputy cabinet members who, if this report is passed, I will be remunerated. I am lucky I can just about manage to give up an unpaid day a week in my role. But amongst this chamber are people who can't make this sacrifice. When this committee decided about these 2 particular roles, it showed us a lot about all the other roles as well. And for me, it feels that we should have a whole branch review, a branch and route review on all of the roles. So, for example, the deputy leader, the leader of the opposition is paid higher in Waltham Forest, but lower in Camden and Enfield. So there is a need now to look at all of the roles. And for that, I don't think we should make an individual decision about 2 roles. I think we should wait for the review to happen next year and see what happens from that. Thank you. So I second this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Bugu, can you please respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bull and Councillor Chadwani. I do agree with what Councillor Chadwani has said, and so as for the Standards Committee, we have agreed that we will have an independent review made for all the, including the members of the Council's allowance and all the actual SRAs as well. So that will be happening in June, and we'll bring the report back in March. And with the savings that the recommendations made by the Labour Group, originally on the Standards Committee report, it showed a figure of 30,834, which was incorrect. But if we're making these recommendations now, it's going to be 12,312 instead of 25,712. So we are bearing these things in mind as well. And I actually support this recommendation, this amendment.
Thank you. We will now vote on the first amendment. If it's agreed, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, raise your hands. No. The amendment is agreed. Now we come to the second amendment. Councillor Crowley Harrison, please put forward your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight, the Standards Committee Chair has put a report before you that in times of unprecedented cuts to local government proposed scandalous changes to our member allowance scheme. Thankfully, some Labour Group members have seen sense and at the 11th hour have managed to reverse this decision against the leader's wishes. The power of democracy, eh? As stated in the report, an independent review panel is already scheduled to be looking at all allowances later this year. Until that happens, we're firmly of the opinion that we shouldn't be making changes to the member allowance scheme, including the level that basic allowances are set at. I'm pleased that the Council is united in agreement that the extra SRAs are not acceptable at this time. However, let's remember that the requests for the extra allowances were not really from the Standards Committee, but at the request of one man, Councillor Ejiofor, the leader of the Council. Last year, these roles, requested by Councillor Ejiofor then too, were rejected by Standards Committee when the proposed SRAs were set at £5,000 each. It takes a courageous leader to bring the same request back a year later, but this time with a 34% increase to raise them to almost £7,000 each, when our council faces even greater financial challenges and our residents increased council tax bills. You surely have to wonder why he's doing this. It seems like Councillor Ejiofor is taking his party's slogan, "For the many, not the few," all too literally when trying to dish out SRAs in this council. It is clear that the decision of allocating allowances to members is not a matter that should be proposed or made by members. Madam Mayor, tonight we have put forward an amendment that respects the impending independent review of our members' allowance scheme that is scheduled for later this year, and therefore requests all allowances, including the basic allowance, to remain at the same value as 2018-2019. I'm sure councillors from both sides will do the decent thing and support this amendment and stop this council using our residents' money in a year where they have to dig even deeper in their pockets and have the prospect of even more economic decline due to Brexit to fund even more allowances for the very people elected to protect them and to represent them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
I second the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bugu, can you please respond?
Thank you, Councillor Dixon and Councillor Coley Harrison. So I just wanted to pick up a few points. Councillor Colley Harrison is correct that when the report came to Standards Committee in July, it was for £5,000 for the additional SRA. But as you sit on the committee as well, you do know that that recommendation, the increase to 6,700, came from the independent review panel, that document that we look at. And in it, it says that you set a band 1A to between 20% to 30% of the leader's allowance. So that 6,700 is actually 20% of the leader's allowance. But if that's it, we've already agreed that we're not going to have that at the moment. We're not going to actually award the SRA to those roles. So we've already had that conversation, and we're going to look at it when we now come to the annual review for the Standards Committee. But I also would like to just add as well that the 2% uplift is also in line with what the council officers receive as well. So they're also going to receive a 2% uplift as well this year. It's been announced nationally. So the 2% uplift is something that is already in place, and for councillors to take this, it comes to £216 per councillor for that additional allowance to the basic allowance. So with that said, I'm not going to agree to the amendment posed by the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much. We will now vote on the second amendment. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. The amendment is lost. We now vote on the substantive recommendations, which will be amended to only include the removal of the 2 SRS for the assistant cabinet members. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? No. The amendment. Abstentions. Oh, abstentions. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you. The amendment is lost. We now be voting on the substantive recommendations as amended, including. Oh, we just done that. Oh well, do forgive me. Well, I thought we'd vote again. I now call on Cabinet Member for Housing and Estate Renewal, Cabinet Ibrahim.
I move the report and its recommendations.
Thank you. Is the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now I call on the Chair of Staffing and Remuneration Committee, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is a statutory requirement. I move it formally, thanking the officers for preparing it.
Is the recommendations agreed? Excellent. Thank you. Now we come to item 11. I would just like to say a few words on this because I want to give extra time to my 2 charities. I first became aware of these 2 wonderful charities. One is called, it used to be called Area 51, and the other one is Ambitious About Autism. Last year, I obviously knew about autism, but not a lot, like a lot of people. And when I have visited first, and that was Area 51 with my colleague, I was so moved by the services they provided. They educate young people, they teach them, they support them to learn about life skills, they support them. Some of them, they have severe complex needs, which they need a lot of support, and some of them, they're mild condition, which they're very talented young people. The when you see the staff there, you cannot help but be moved. They are incredible, incredible people who do an incredible job to our young people. Ambitious about autism, as you see in a minute from the presentation, it has quite a college, the Tree House, and the young people. In fact, I first got to know a little bit about them when they first moved in Haringey, the Tree House. I remember when they had this cabinet. It wasn't a proper building. I was then involved in what it was called social services, and the children services were under social services. And I got to know a little bit about them. Again, when I visit Ambitious about autism, they are such an incredible people. All the staff, they are first-class staff, and they care about the young people, they educate them, help them, they support them. I can't say enough about them. I recommend that if you have time to visit those two charities, you will benefit and you will learn a lot. And you will see what a good work they're doing for our young people, because a lot of them are Haringey young people. I don't want to waste any more time. I'm about to say this. If one thing I have done as the mayor this year is to highlight their work, and then I'm happy. That's all I'd like to say. Can I invite the two charities to please start when you're ready? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much for inviting us here this evening to talk about our work. My colleagues are here with me, Alison Worsley, who's Director of External Affairs, and Maria Chambers, who's Director of Education. And my name is Yolanta Lasota, and I'm Chief Executive of Ambitious About Autism. Before I start to talk a little bit about our work and the children and young people we support, I would really love to thank you, Madam Mayor, for choosing us as your Charity of the Year and helping to highlight the issue across the borough. It's been an immense honour to be involved this year. In our presentation, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the education and employment challenges that are faced by young autistic people, and explaining a little bit about what we're doing to try and help them, and posing a couple of questions about what we think are the issues going forwards. Sorry. So I wanted to start really about explaining a little bit about autism. I imagine that there are people here who have got lived experience of autism and perhaps who've worked with autistic people, so already know a little bit. But I thought I'd just say a few words. Autism is a lifelong developmental condition. 1 in 100 children and young people with autism have autism in the UK. And autism affects how we communicate and how we experience the world around us. I always say that when you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism, because autism affects people differently. And some autistic people also have other conditions, such as they may have ADHD, mental health issues. Around half of people with autism will have also a learning disability. So every single person is unique. Before I go into talking about some of the challenges, I'd really like to emphasise that all of our children and young people are wonderful people with huge talents. And that's the thing that we really need to focus on today and throughout our work. Many of our young people have fantastic talents and real opportunities for the future, but they face huge barriers in education, training and employment. So I'll just introduce Alison.
Thank you. I'm going to say a little bit now about autism nationally and about autism locally here in Haringey. So nationally, nearly 120,000 pupils with special educational needs in England have autism, and this number is growing year on year. Last year, Ambitious About Autism's We Need an Education campaign and research revealed that formal, that is, permanent or fixed-term exclusions of children with autism in England have risen by almost 60% in 5 years, and that compares to a rise across the board for children and young people's exclusions of only 4%. The overall exclusion rate shows that autistic pupils are at a much higher risk of exclusion than their peers. Many children also face long delays in getting the help and support they need via their education, health and care plans. According to our survey of over 900 parents and carers of pupils with autism, 40% had been waiting over 18 months to see whether they could get this support through an education, health and care plan. Sadly, we know that once a young person leaves compulsory education, opportunities for further study and employment are limited. This isn't because they don't want to or don't have the ability, but because the right opportunities and support are missing to enable them to do this. The autism employment gap costs society an estimated £9 billion a year. So looking at the picture in Haringey, in 2018 there were 756 pupils with a primary special educational need of autism within schools in Haringey. This is a 46% increase in pupil numbers since 2012 and is a continuing trend in line with the London and national picture. The largest rise in pupil numbers has been within state-funded secondary schools, followed by state-funded primary schools and then special schools. The increase in pupils in special schools does not include Treehouse School, our provision, which is classified separately as a non-maintained special school. But numbers have remained consistent in our provision over the past few years. This month you may have seen that the Mayor of London published a post-16 special educational needs review. This showed that there will be a continuous increase in demand for post-16 places for learners with autism up to 2022. And to meet this need, there will need to be another 930 new places to meet this projected 29% rise. So a lot to do both nationally and locally. Maria.
So I want to tell you about our ambitious approach. We have high aspirations for our pupils and learners. Our goal is that when they leave our settings, they will have the opportunity to access employment, further education or training, and live as part of the communities of their choice. We offer a broad and balanced curriculum that's highly personalised to each of our pupils and learners. It's designed to respond to their particular needs, talents and interests. We employ a dedicated and transdisciplinary team to support our young people, including qualified teachers, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists and behaviour and employment specialists. Most of our children and young people have education, health and care plans, which outline their aspirations, outcomes, needs and support. We work collaboratively with the young people and their parents and carers to input into and develop these plans and ensure they are implemented and meet targets. Progress is regularly and comprehensively monitored, evaluated and reported. Treehouse School, which is our school in Muswell Hill. It was set up in 1997 by a group of parents, including the author Nick Hornby, who is one of our vice presidents. Treehouse School is Haringey's only non-maintained special school. We currently have 85 pupils aged from 4 to 19 across London and the home counties. Every pupil has autism and/or a learning disability. We secured our second outstanding rating from Ofsted following our last inspection in November 2017. As part of our ambitious approach to education, Treehouse School works closely with other local schools, community groups and employers to maximise opportunities for pupils to succeed in their learning and prepare for adulthood. We run a reverse inclusion programme with local schools, including Muswell Hill Primary School, Highgate School and Glendower School. This involves pupils from our schools visiting Treehouse schools and vice versa. We develop bonds of friendship between our young people and ultimately increase understanding and acceptance of difference and promote inclusion. Our employment specialists also run social enterprise projects of pupils and set up local work experience opportunities, increasing independence and employability skills. The Ambitious College is London's only specialist day college for young people with complex autism. We set up Ambitious College in temporary accommodation in 2014 thanks to the generous support of funders. In 2017 we officially opened on 2 new permanent campuses, the Pears campus in the College of Haringey, Enfield and North East London, and our West London campus, the Pears campus in West Thames College in Isleworth. Our co-located model enables our learners to access local learning, social employment and leisure opportunities whilst receiving the specialist support they need. There is a strong focus on employability skills with learners undertaking work experience in local cafes and businesses. The Ambitious College also has a fully equipped kitchen where learners can develop their independent living skills, preparing them for greater independence when they leave us. We've outlined our work at Treehouse School and Ambitious College, and that places a strong emphasis on employability skills and independent living skills. This ensures young people can make a successful transition into adulthood and continue to live and thrive in a community of their choice. In addition to working with our existing learners, Ambitious College is working with the Whittington Hospital and Project Search to offer an internship programme to a wider range of young people from across London, aged 16 to 24, with an EHC plan. We're also proud to be part of the Haringey Education Partnership.
So to sum up, we obviously lead in delivering education, but we also campaign nationally and locally to change education opportunities for all children and young people with autism. In April, we look forward to the government reporting back on its exclusion review and anticipate that there will be some changes proposed as part of that. We've been running our We Need an Education campaign for the last 18 months to put pressure on government to change attitudes to school exclusion for children with autism. The message is very simple. If 60% of young people are not in education full-time, they're not learning and preparing for adulthood. And this is a national story and a national picture. So we summarised, we believe every child and young person with autism deserves an equal chance to a full and enriching education that prepares them for adulthood. However, as you've heard this evening, there are many barriers preventing these young people from reaching this potential. They're more at risk of exclusion, they can struggle to have their needs understood and met at school, and this can have a long-term impact on their ability to access further education or employment when they reach adulthood. With the number of pupils within Haringey schools also increasing, we ask the Council to consider how it can best support these children to ensure their needs are adequately met and to enable them to have a positive future within the borough. We also ask that the Council considers how it can support young people with autism in Haringey to access employment experience, apprenticeships, work experience, apprenticeships and employment going forwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lee, yes, please come forward. Introduce yourself.
Shall do. Good evening. My name's Lee Nelson, and I'm Vice Principal for Curriculum at John Dewey College, also known as Area 51 Education. We were Area 51 Education initially, and then we got a bit bigger, and we thought, oh, let's be a bit more serious sounding. But really, Area 51 Education is what we're about. We're not like the others, and that was the kind of point to produce something that didn't already exist. What we do is we provide continuing educational opportunities for young people with severe, complex, and profound learning difficulties. And we're approaching our 10th anniversary, and over the last 10 years we have continued to design, develop and deliver entirely individualised programmes of learning based on the aspirations of each young person that comes to us. And what we're about is real skills for real people. And we don't deliver stuff that we think people should have. They come to us and they tell us what they want, and we help them get there. And that's what we're for. We work holistically, and our programmes are based entirely on the aspirations of the young people that come to see us, and it could be becoming a bus driver or being able to help to dress yourself. Whatever the scale of your ambition, that's what we're about, because our students are amongst the most marginalised members of society. Their aspirations are unlikely to be made the subject of a television documentary, because it's about 15% children with profound learning disabilities represent about 15% of the school-age population. And that's approximately the same number of 16-year-olds who every year don't manage to get their A to C's in maths and English. But you don't, and no disrespect to those, but you don't see much attention given to the guys that we work with in the positive way that it's given to other people who are equally deserving of that attention, obviously. Because there are not that many people who might see the sort of the triumph of being able to choose what you want for your dinner for yourself in the same light as some of the other achievements that you might see for a young person anywhere. But we see those differences and we see those steps, because it's those small steps towards independence for our students that motivate us. And those are what we strive for each and all of our students, because our work is all about scale and it's all about detail. They make people with profound learning disabilities make very small steps of progress. And as I've just said, being able to choose your own dinner might be one of those things, because it's our learners' real life. It's their lives. Come on, beeper. Thank you. Hey. But we're all about these incredibly small steps of progress that most other people won't see. We value the difference between being fed by a supporter and being able to hold your own fork and feed yourself. And it's that kind of progress, I suppose, that's easy to lose sight of in this current age of austerity. It's easy to direct those scarce resources to places where they are more likely to garner attention. When times are tough, where do we as a nation put our resources? And Tomlinson report said, in the global economy, the drive is to turn out highly educated, competitive young people who continuously upskill to compete in the knowledge economy. And that's right, but rightly or wrongly, that means all children are schooled to become economically productive adults. Wealth, knowledge and social mobility are prized values of active citizens, but what do we actually mean by citizenship? I mean, that's a question I think it's worth asking at this point, because do we mean that our young people, what do we want for them? That they are consumed by a relentless and individualistic drive to attain wealth and social status? Or that they can be happy and productive members of a supportive community? It's not for me to say, is it? But as Simon Duffy did say it, Simon Duffy from the Citizens Network, he said, what's our dream for those we love? Money, power and fame, or a life of citizenship, freedom, meaning and contribution? And that's what we're for. That's what we're about. We believe very much in the latter, and we help our young people have the same rights as everybody else to be able to choose a good life in which they make a valued contribution to the community. And choice is the key thing. We support our learners to develop the skills they need to participate successfully in adult life through co-production and empathy. We hope to lead them towards to become happy and fulfilled people. Because what we did when we were deciding what we were going to do was we swapped the expectation that neuroatypical people will somehow develop into neurotypical people. We swapped that to appreciating the unique abilities of each individual at that time. And we swapped the expectation of economic productivity for the production of social value. And every single one of our students who works towards their individual aspirations with us is supported by our specialist team who create learning opportunities from everyday moments and not from textbooks. Unless, of course, textbooks is what you love, in which case tell us and we'll work from them as well. It's very much about what you want. So that's big ideas, grandiose thoughts perhaps for a small charity, but in practice it's really practical and it's really very simple. I'll tell you how it works. You may have noticed some of the pictures in the slides as we come through, and here's two here. The picture on my right there is by Jason, and he is a student who would be typically described as having severe learning difficulties. And the picture on the left, my left, is by Doan, and he's a student who would be, again, described as having profound learning difficulties. Both pictures were professionally exhibited in public art exhibitions and both sold for a significant amount of money each. The point being that we don't sell the work because you buy it because you feel sorry for the person who's made it. You buy the work because it's a lovely piece of artwork that you want to put on your wall. Hopefully you recognise there Stoan's pieces in the style of Banksy. It's not as big as I'd like it to be, but that's a Banksy graffiti thing there. And Jason's done his version of Girl with a Pearl Earring. There. What was the value in this experience? Well, momentarily, both young people were briefly economically productive citizens. They made some money for their work. But much more vitally, both young people were recognised for their abilities. They were able to be part of a community that recognised them for their abilities as artists and didn't see their disabilities. Actually, just to come off script for a bit, when I gave Jason the money he made for that picture, and I said to him, Jason, you're a professional artist, you've made a professional sale in a professional gallery. The smile on his face. That's why I go to work in the mornings. Yeah? That's what makes the difference. Sorry, I've told that story about 10 dozen times, and every single time I tell it, I still well up. And there's millions of those things happening all day, every day, in the work we do and the work that the guys at Ambitious do. So our role as an organisation is to continue to make sure we challenge the barriers that prevent young people with severe and complex and profound learning difficulties from achieving their aspirations. And we do this through a continuing education and training with a real focus on real life. Because if each student involved in these projects and the many others we run throughout the year benefited from belonging to a community in which their skills were valued equally. And the people they came into contact with benefited from the unique opportunity to be uniquely present in the moment. When Jason smiled at me like that, I wasn't thinking about the shopping or my appointment. It was just, oh, God. Sorry. Just a great big grin on my face. Because that's what the job is for. That's what we do, and that's why it's a precious, precious thing. And I'm very, very proud, thank you, Madam Mayor, for inviting us here to talk to you all about it today. At the risk of sounding smug, we know our work is immeasurably valuable. We have a real focus on real life for all of our young people, making sure that people who have severe, complex or profound learning disabilities remain visible at the forefront of community thinking. But, and forgive me for this, we face some challenges. We know that in the next few years we will be required to move from our current home in the Cultural Quarter in Wood Green, sometime in the next 24 months, though we don't know exactly when. Currently we've got nowhere else to go, and we hope we'll be able to remain in Haringey. We greatly enjoy being part of Haringey's vibrant and diverse community and look forward to continuing our partnership with the Council, pursuing real lives for real people with severe and profound learning difficulties. We work with people who have severe and profound learning disabilities and their lives matter. Collectively, our values should replace economic wealth with social wealth. And unfortunately, at the minute, the social wealth brought to the borough by learners at John Dewey Specialist College is under a certain amount of threat. Sorry to end on a grim one, but I hope there was enough moments of joy prior to that to make it all worthwhile. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We start the debate. We normally will have a debate for 45 minutes, but because I allow our speakers longer, we cut down the debate to 40 minutes. So, I'd like to ask Councillor Connors, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to discuss and debate the important issues of how we as a council can promote the excellent services that currently serve people with learning disabilities and autism. This is a moment to celebrate the excellent work done in different parts of the borough, particularly from Ambitious About Autism and the John Dewey College. But it's also a moment to stop and really think about what services we want to provide for people who have a wide range of learning disabilities and autism. Saying someone has a learning disability or autism doesn't begin to delve into the individuality of that person. We are aware that both the terms learning disability and autism covers a very wide range of conditions. Some people may have more capacity to live at home with support, while others may need a very specialised environment from which they can engage with the world around them. Tonight, I not only want to encourage you to consider how we provide individual services within day opportunities for people with high needs, but also how we support all those with learning disabilities and autism in our communities. A NICE report into the costs of implementing the NICE guidance on services for people with autism states that a significant proportion of the adults with autism across the whole spectrum experience social and economic exclusion. They experience barriers to accessing the support and services they need to live independently. So how can Haringey change this? One recommendation from this report suggests multidisciplinary teams with a single point of contact. So access to clinical psychologists, nurses, OTs, physios, social workers and speech and language therapists. But I would also add housing support workers, financial support and educational specialists, particularly around support and employment. And this would require joined-up NHS and council funding. But imagine a service with all these professionals on hand to provide advice and support and help, both to parents, the young person and adults, based in a specialist centre. Tackling problems when they occur, rather than having long referrals and multiple referrals, would reduce the stress on families and allow a degree of control back into their lives. A specialist daycare centre which also provides safe, supported community engagement. Socialising is something that we take for granted, but can be lost when we concentrate on medical needs, and should be front and centre when we think about how we support any person with autism or a learning disability. We need to use this moment to take the initiative and radically strengthen how we think about providing support for anyone with a learning disability or autism in our borough. I challenge us all to look at providing a multidisciplinary team approach based within a specialist daycare centre to allow individualised care for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Knowing that this is probably one of your last meeting before you step down as the Mayor, let me begin by saying congratulations for demonstrating an exemplary leadership throughout your mayoral term as the first citizen of Haringey, our borough. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you especially for choosing 3 great charities, educational institutions, providing special education, and you devoted your mayoral fund to raise awareness about the vital work they do. Also, Madam Mayor, I'm particularly proud to have organised a sponsored walk in Haringey Parks to raise funds for your chosen charities. As the Deputy Cabinet Lead for Women and Equalities, I always argued for adequate services for those, for no fault of their own, are facing grave disadvantages in our society. To quote John Dewey's college's, a quote from the colleague who just spoke from the charity. People with severe, complex and profound learning disabilities are one of the most marginalised and invisible group in society. And as a passionate advocate for the right of the most marginalised and invisible in our community, I believe we can do more. We can do more to help them. I'm going to briefly talk about the role of the voluntary sector, why the council needs to support the voluntary sector that, does amazing things. The voluntary sector, in my opinion, is key to empowering some of the most invisible groups in our society. From my experience, I have seen how effective they can be in articulating the voice of the voiceless and support the most vulnerable and marginalised. Madam Mayor, sadly, it was this sector that bore the brunt of heartless government austerity policies. Most voluntary sector organisations either lost their fund or are holding on a shoestring. Again, our council could do more to help our voluntary sector to rebuild and revive. We can do that by dedicating more resources to support our voluntary sector. That, in turn, will enable our voluntary sector to bring external funding that can remedy some of the disadvantages that our various groups in our society experience. If we build a strong voluntary sector, we can even ease some of the financial burden on our statutory services. As much as I'd like to highlight the human element for more support to our voluntary sector, which is compelling in my opinion, there is also a straightforward financial argument to consider. As I said earlier, a stronger voluntary sector will be able to bring more external funding to our borough that could help some of the most disadvantaged communities, people in our community.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and congratulations as well on all the work you've done to support these fantastic charities. It's an honour to be able to make a contribution to such an important debate like this. As councillors, we are in a privileged position because the platform that we are afforded means that we are in a better place, a better position than most to be able to make a real impact and make positive differences in our community. But beyond the potholes and the parking, those positive differences can be achieved by using our platform to inform and to help challenge discrimination. For many people with autism, particularly children, the stigma they face can dramatically affect their experiences and their lives. They, more than most, face discrimination regularly, and this is often as a result of so many people being uninformed. It's our duty to challenge this head-on. Let's consider where we are now. 6 in 10 children with autism will face bullying at school, and the stigma they face can hugely affect the outcomes of these children. To change this, we need to rethink our approach and our attitudes. Let's not solely focus on the ways a child with autism will be held back in modern society, but on the steps we should be taking to ensure those children can meet their full potential, just as we should with any child. To create this environment for the sort of positive changes we want to see, we must work in partnership, not just with parents, but with children too. No child with autism is the same, and realising this is a crucial first step. Catering to their needs and gaining a real understanding will be good for all involved. One effective way we can do this is by supporting peer awareness, which exists to educate and support teachers as well as pupils to promote a wider understanding of autism. Peer awareness can be something as simple as an assembly in a school, but it can also go much further with specific training offered to teachers as well as the pupils so they can create a better environment for children with autism. Where this has been done effectively, the results have often been transformative. They have often led to pupils with autism being reported to have more positive interactions with their peers, and the same is often said for their peers as well, who go on to feel a greater empathy and understanding towards children with autism. Peer awareness in schools is just one example of how we can do better by children with autism through partnership working. Madam Mayor, I want to again offer my thanks for the opportunity to make a small contribution to this debate, and I sincerely hope that the discussion doesn't end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hakata, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Dixon and Gunes for their contributions. In everything we do, we can always do better, and this is most true when working with people on the autism spectrum. Austerity was devised to give the many a jolly good kicking in order to profit the few, and there are many, many more people on the spectrum that most of us do not know. Almost 750,000 people in the UK, that's 1 in 100. Half of those may have a learning disability, with school exclusions way above national average and virtually no employment support, even though at least half want it. We could go on about stats, but you get the picture. But what we do know is that under austerity, those that are unsung have received the biggest kicking of all. Thankfully, the fight back from this ideological cruelty is in full swing. In Haringey, there is a new commitment to improve services for people with autism. We have committed to reopening the Roundway and other day centres, with the re-establishment of autism services a key and critical pledge. But that is not all. A root and branch rethinking and redesign of how care is delivered is central to this administration's plans, and to do this differently by placing stakeholders at the heart of the redesign, so that this isn't a top-down approach of old, but one in which those who rely on services are empowered to design it and even drive it, otherwise known as a strength-based or asset-based approach, in which the question is not simply what can the borough do for you, but what can you do for the borough? With Councillor Pippa Connor, I visited a session for people with severe learning difficulties as part of the scrutiny project, looking into day opportunities for adults. The session was run by Hale, and one great innovation was their mini employment agency for those with learning difficulties, giving the real sense of purpose and also increasing well-being to service users. Simple but effective. It is to organisations and people like this that Haringey is looking to in order to reinvent the way we do social care. Looking to the assets that are already there in Haringey, in the people, the social enterprises, voluntary sector and our service users, dovetailing with the reinvention of day centres to create a place of opportunity for the many on the spectrum who deserve a good life, fulfilling life as much as anyone. Those on the spectrum, as their family and their families, have been rising to the challenge of autism for many years. Now Haringey must catch up and join them.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to echo other points, thank you for raising such an important issue. I'm going to speak very briefly, but I just want to focus on employment opportunities for adults with autism. The National Autistic Society has a long-running campaign focusing on the lack of employment opportunities for those with autism. Just 16% of adults with autism are in full-time paid work, and only 32% of autistic adults are in some kind of paid work. And that statistic has remained static for well over a decade. Shockingly, 77% of the unemployed autistic adults, or those responding on their behalf, said that they actually really did want to go out to work. Whilst the government's committed to halving the disability employment gap, there is still a major concern that without better understanding of autism from both employers and the government, that autistic adults will continue to be left behind and their abilities overlooked. Autistic people have said that their employers don't see their abilities. They simply see their autism and they see a problem. Meanwhile, employers have said they're worried about getting it wrong. They don't really know where they can go for advice, and they don't really know how they start employing somebody with autism. There are two things that I'd like to suggest that we could do together. One is that we haven't done it already, that we do sign the National Autistic Society's petition. It's calling for the Disability Minister to take more action to close that employment gap. And the second is that we can take more action together to support autistic people into the workplace if that's the right pathway for them. We have lots of local business links and forums, and of course the council's a really large employer. We must reach out into those groups and forums more on this issue, as well as working more widely. Some of you will know that I actually work in HR for a really large voluntary sector organisation. I run a pretty big community programme, and it's aimed at providing work experience and paid employment for those who are really underrepresented in our sector. And we talk a lot about the value, importance and success of non-homogenous organisations that really do represent society fully. This evening, I'm going to make a commitment to take this back to my own organisation and to ensure that we include people with autism and learning disabilities into our wider community programme. I would really encourage those of you that are employed to do the same thing. I think if we can all act as ambassadors, both at work and as councillors, we can really go a long way in encouraging employers to think differently and see the real value in having a diverse organisation. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer, thank you very much. It's great. Thank you. Councillor Carling.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Mayor, if I could sit down, I would appreciate it. First of all, I would like very much to thank the Ambitious About Autism and John Dewey School for coming and speaking to us this evening. Both were very impressive presentations and very informative as well. I think when thinking about learning disability and people with autism, the issue really is that what we need to do is we need to operate as a cohesive society. The idea that we aren't neighbours, the idea that we shouldn't care about people because they're not our children or our partners, leads to alienation and the situation to a certain extent that we've ended up in now. There are lots of things that we can do. One of the things that concerns me is the transition between young people who are at school, who then become adults. And I agree with people who've spoken before, the problems that they then face with things like with employment. I sit on the board of Homes for Haringey, and I'm very pleased to say that Homes for Haringey has an intern a paid intern in the repair service with autism, and somebody with learning disabilities who is in the managing director's office. And I would like to see that replicated across the council. Possibly something we could also think about is using procurement in our contracts to ensure that as part of our contracts, we actually insist that internships are given, and where possible internships are given to people with learning disabilities, because this would make a difference and would start to place those young people, or not even young people, into proper employment. There are so many valuable charities as well that happen in Haringey. In Hornsey, we have supported a group called Bright Stars. And when I went to one of their inaugural meetings, it was just so amazing, because what happened was they teach children drumming and music and dancing. And these young people were led onto the stage, these children. So some of them were severely disabled. But when the drumming started and the music started, they danced in time to the music, even though they had to be led onto the stage. And that was really moving and just showed how tapping into something slightly different can actually unlock great potential. Again, thank you so much for coming to speak to us. As a council, I hope we can do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank our guest speakers this evening. It was inspiring to hear about your work, but clearly there is more that we can do to make the ordinary possible for young people with autism and learning difficulties in our borough. For example, I was shocked to see on the Ambitious About Autism website that 45% of children with autism have been illegally excluded from school. So my question is, do we provide enough specialised training on autism for teachers and school staff to keep these children at school? I note that Lib Dem-run Sutton Council provides specific training on autism for everyone who works in social care, and they've introduced a multi-agency e-learning programme on autism which can be accessed by all council staff and partner agencies, including the NHS, CCG, police, housing, education, employment, and many others. Could this be a model for our council? Thankfully, as a society, we are beginning to wake up to autism and learning disabilities. There are now autism-friendly screenings in several cinema chains. Morrison's has introduced weekly quieter hours in 439 stores, and Asda in 35 stores, but sadly not here in Haringey. As a council, we need to encourage more Haringey businesses to run quieter hours. We also need to press leisure providers to put on learning disability and autistic sessions, and to add new and more ambitious activities. However, we must not forget the many adults with autism and learning disabilities in Haringey, many of whom have had their care packages reduced and their 3-day centre closed. We argued that whilst the closures provided savings, it would leave vulnerable adults more isolated and carers unsupported, as well as being a false economy which would cost this council more as needs would escalate. We therefore welcome the announcement that the Roundway Centre will reopen, but urge this council to find the right partner to ensure that they provide well-planned and well-structured service. As a council, we have to do more to make the ordinary possible for everyone with autism and learning disabilities, and to support the extraordinary families and carers in our borough who look after them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bull.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This is one of my out of my heart speeches. I don't write these sort of speeches. I just open my mouth and hope what comes out makes sense. Yeah, exactly. So I have to say, I wanted to start off by saying that the mantra that has guided me through politics for the last 18 years is, what's the point of being in politics if you can't stand up for the people who can't stand up for themselves? And so my speech tonight is about thank yous. And the first thank you I'd like to give is to the people that spoke tonight. As Chief Whip, it's my responsibility to ask people to speak in debates. Now, notwithstanding, there is one councillor in my group that always puts his name forward for speakers, but on this particular issue, he wasn't followed by a number of other people, principally because a lot of people come back and said, we are a Labour group who are not going to speak on something just for the sake of speaking, because we don't know anything about the subject. So tonight, after this meeting, I'm hoping people are going to leave this meeting with a great deal more knowledge than what they came here, and I certainly feel like that. People will know that I've taken a great stand over the years about the services for the most vulnerable in our society, and I think some recognition needs to be made to Councillor Ahmet when she was in the Cabinet for setting up the ASC Design Group, which is now being picked up by Councillor James. One of the things that I know Councillor Ahmet wanted to do, and now has been followed on by Councillor James, is learning some of the mistakes we made of the past. Nothing about me without me. And that is what the co-design group is seeking to do, and I think it's really important. So I like the reference that was made in the presentation about co-production. That should be something that runs through everything that we do as an organisation, as an authority. The next thing I'd like to do is say thank you to a group that we don't say thank you enough to. A few years ago, when I was on the council, we had a guy called Bob Harris, who was Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health. He started off something called the Carers Week, where we start recognising carers. So I'd like to thank him and carers in this borough for the excellent work that they do. Governments of all political persuasions don't understand how important the role is of carers. They ease the pressure on the system exponentially. I know this as someone who works in the NHS, and I've always said for every pound you take out of adult social care, you knock on £4 onto the NHS. Governments and political parties at a national level need to start addressing some of the savage cuts that have been made to local authorities that have meant that so many people in our society are suffering unnecessarily. The next thank you I'd like to say in winding up is to thank Rowland Hill Nursery in my ward for the work that they do, opening their doors to people from all backgrounds, of all needs, and educating them to the best of their ability. I think this is just the beginning of the discussion. I think we've got a lot to do. I think the commitment that was made by the previous Cabinet Member, which is picked up by this one about daycare provision, is just part of the offer that we need to make to people. And the key message tonight is people with autism, you're not alone, you don't suffer in silence, we're here for you, and we are here to make your lives better. And I think that's the message we should be taking for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross is the last contribution. With no time, I've been advised there's no time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I echo what many people have said in the chamber tonight, and start by congratulating you on your choice of charities. I don't think anyone could be anything other than deeply impressed by what we heard from the John Dewey College and Ambitious about autism. May I take this opportunity to add my thanks for everything you are doing for Haringey residents. It's excellent to hear that so many councillors have fresh ideas for how this authority can support our constituents with autism to achieve their true potential. However, I want to speak about something that's not in our hands, but which is still vital for our efforts, and that's diagnosis. Last year, the former Health Minister, Norman Lamb MP, sent freedom of information requests to every clinical commissioning group and relevant NHS trust in England, asking them how long patients had to wait to begin their diagnostic assessment. Many CCGs and trusts, including apparently those covering Haringey, simply don't collect the data necessary to answer. However, the picture that emerged from the places that did is deeply disappointing. Patients are meant to have their assessment within 3 months. That seems to be being missed in the majority of cases, often by a lot. In some cases, patients have been left waiting more than 2 years for a diagnosis. That kind of delay is really unhelpful. With any condition, a diagnosis can come as an enormous relief to its recipient, as it allows them to understand what is happening to them and why. Conversely, not having one can be distressing and confusing. But there's an even more basic reason why delayed diagnoses are a problem. It's very difficult to offer someone support and assistance if you don't know what they're supporting us and assisting them with. Sorry, what you're supporting them and assisting them with. Therefore, delaying diagnoses often means delaying help. It's not within our power as a local authority to change this directly. It's an NHS matter. But, Madam Mayor, I suggest that in the light of this debate, this Council should lobby Haringey Clinical Commissioning Group to make diagnostic assessments a priority and to lobby the Government to provide adequate funding for them. I cannot be alone in being willing to pay higher taxes if it means my fellow residents don't have to wait in limbo for a diagnosis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call on the Cabinet Member for Children, Education and Families and the Cabinet Member for Adults and Health to respond. You have 3 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'd first like to thank Yolanta, Alison, Maria and Lee for speaking to us tonight. I can't really turn around and say anything or no one will hear me. But I think your passion and commitment to the young people that you support and care for was absolutely evident to all of us, and we really are grateful to you for sharing that with us this evening. Madam Mayor, this debate is especially timely for 2 reasons. As we heard from our colleagues, the first is that, like most local authorities up and down the country, Haringey has seen a significant increase in the number of children and young people with a diagnosis of autism and with learning disabilities. The second reason is that despite this, there are significant shortages in SEND funding, which are the result of government decisions which are now, I think, having what can only be described as a punitive effect on our schools and on the provision of services. The Local Government Association estimates a national funding gap of £800 million in the coming financial year, and Haringey, like most local authorities, is feeling this pressure. Unless the government changes its position, providing the support that is needed to increasing numbers of children and young people will become increasingly difficult. Against this background, it's more important than ever that we continue to work with organisations like Ambitious and like John Dewey to make the ordinary possible for children and young people with autism and learning disabilities in Haringey. For each of those children and young people, that will mean something unique. It might mean choosing what you wear that morning. It might mean choosing what you have for dinner. It might mean making the most of your talents and doing exceptionally well in your exams. For each of them, we must be able to work together as a council with organisations like Ambitious and like John Dewey to make sure they get the support to reach their full potential. To have that positive future that Yolanta referred to, or to become the happy and productive members of a supportive community described by Lee.
There is much to do, and we of course face challenges in doing it, but we are making progress and we're committed to getting it right. And with that, I'll hand over to Councillor James.
Thank you. I'd also just like to echo the thanks that have gone out both to Area 51, John Dewey, and Ambitious About Autism for coming speaking to us today, and for their work, dedication. I had the pleasure, I don't know, say pleasure or honour of being able to visit Area 51 a few weeks ago, and was very, very impressed with the work they're doing. Speaking as somebody who myself has worked in a similar or in an adjacent sector in education, working with people with specific learning difficulties, mental health needs and autism in adult and higher education, I was extremely impressed with the work that I saw going on there. And some of that was communicated this evening, but really their presentation was just the tip of the iceberg. So thank you also, Madam Mayor, for selecting these two organisations as your charities for this year. Just in summing up, I don't want to repeat things that have already come up and people have addressed, but I think there's a real need to recognise what neurodiversity means and the nature of autism as an umbrella or diagnosis, and that although we may be dealing with many people who have autism who also have profound learning difficulties and complex needs, there are many others who we will encounter in universities, in professions, and in our daily lives, who also require a degree of consideration and support and understanding as well in the context in which they're otherwise thriving and doing very well in. And I think it's just important to remember that. In terms of council work, the Ermine Road Community Hub is also doing some very valuable and important work with autistic people with learning difficulties as well. And as has already been mentioned, in the process of redesign, which Councillor Ahmet began and which has taken over, we're looking at reprovisioning more day opportunities for people with autism and learning difficulties. I think, in general, what we really need to work hard as in the council, or harder at, is providing excellent support for all our residents who have autism and learning difficulties across the entire life cycle. We can't wash our hands when they reach 16 or 18 or 24. These people are adults as well. We want them to be able to contribute to society, to be valued members of society within Haringey and wider. And it's important that we have services that meet those needs and address those issues. So I can see the red light. I won't go on about what we would like to do, but just to say that we really appreciate the work that both Ambitious for Autism and Area 51 are doing. We hope to be able to continue to work with you and to see your work flourish and grow further in Haringey. And thank you very much for the opportunity that you've given to just to tell us a bit more about that. So, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
That concludes the debate. I would like to thank everyone for their participation in the debate. And I do hope, and I really do hope, that this is the beginning of a new or improved relationship with the two charities. I think it's in our interest to work closely together to improve the lives of our young people. Thank you very much, and I'd like especially thank you to Ambitious and about Autism and to the Area 51. Thank you all very much. Now we move to item 14. We have a question from a member of the public. Mr. Callahan is here. When you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me ask this question. And may I also say how impressed I was by the last debate. Very good, very valuable. The question is, the change from a committee to a cabinet system introduced by the last Labour government in 2000, unlike the Freedom of Information Act introduced in the same year, both had the noble aim of increasing efficiency, democratic participation and transparency. But sadly, in the case of this cabinet system change introduced by the Local Government Act, is there any evidence that this has actually happened? The official government report into the bankrupt Tory-led Northamptonshire County Council referred to the inability of backbench members to obtain information, and this was also reported as a feature of our previous administration's attempt to bring in the HTV, now happily abandoned. Increasingly, local authorities are returning to a committee system of governance, as they are now able to do. And there is support in Haringey for this. Would the leader and the council, I know the leader can't answer for some members of the council, but anyway, would he ask the relevant officers, consider this option for Haringey, and would he ask the relevant officer what steps would be needed? Would a referendum be necessary, and if so, could it be called to coincide with council elections to save costs?
Thank you. The Leader of the Council.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Mr Callaghan, thank you for coming today and asking a very interesting question. I have to say I've been kicking around local government for longer than many people actually think. I've actually been a councillor under the committee system. I've also been a councillor under the mayoral system, as well as a councillor under this current leader in the executive system. In my opinion, the leader in the executive system gives much more openness, much more transparency, and much more ability for for all councillors to engage and make decisions. That's just... Sorry? You're heckling me already, Josh. Come on. All right.
He was doing it the last meeting. Pay him no mind.
Now, he's heckling me. That's just what I need, yeah. But in my view, there's a lot of good things about this current system, and it's about the people and ensuring that the people make the system work. The Local Government Act provides a choice for councils and for local people to decide how their council should be governed. This includes allowing councils, where they wish, to move away from an executive form of government, for example, a leader or a mayor or a cabinet executive, to a committee system. The Act also removed previous constraints around the timing of when councils could change their governance models, so they can take these decisions when it best suits them and suits the need of the council and the people that they represent. The Act provides that a local authority must pass a council resolution if it wishes to change governance arrangements. If a local authority passes such a resolution to change from one form of governance to another, or for one form of executive to another, it is prevented from doing so again in the next 5 years, unless a second resolution is approved following a referendum. This council will not require a referendum to change to a committee-style arrangement. The existing form of government, because the existing form of governance was not approved under a referendum, and it has not passed a resolution to do so. It would also be, if such a decision was to be required from ordinary members of the public, it would require 5% of local government electors in our area to petition a local authority to hold such a referendum. It would be prudent for any local authority making a change in its governance arrangements to implement this at the start of a new municipal year or a new administration. Any significant change to the council's governance arrangement requires careful and serious consideration, not just for whether or not they will be effective going forward, but also because of the resource implications. There would need to be detailed consideration given to whether or not changing the governance model of the organisation better met the needs of residents, and as well as for the council for better governance. In this view of the significant it says here, in view of the significant implications for residents and members, everybody must be consulted. Okay. Thank you for your question.
Can I ask a supplementary?
I can allow one supplementary question for clarification.
Yes. So it's just, well, I'm old enough to remember when this council was actually bursting full with people in the galleries, and when Councillor Corbyn was in his full glory. And it seemed that things were better then, and there was more participatory democracy. So I hope that at some stage we could at least consider the evidence for whether things were better in the old days.
Thank you very much. I have accepted the responses to written questions admitted as late business, and we have six other questions from members. 30 minutes are available for this item. Now, can I ask the first question? I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name. Can I say Councillor James at the back? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Chiri and Kandut. My question is to Councillor Ibrahim. What will the recently announced £1 billion investment in council homes over the next 5 years be spent on?
Thank you, Councillor Chirian Kandath. Show off. It's quite easy, actually. Estimated 965,000.8 million from the housing revenue account capital programme is going to be invested over the next 5 years, and was set out in the budget agreed at Cabinet in February. This will enable the council to bring homes up to decent homes standards, and also to deliver the 1,000 homes that we've committed to delivering at council rents by 2022. So the MTFS agreed that Cabinet will also set out the key components of how to invest this money. So 285 million will be spent on existing stock. Of that, so a proportion of that, which is 227 million, will be to bring our existing stock up to decent home standards, which unfortunately is part of some of the money that we lost in 2010 when the decent homes money that we previously were receiving ended. Of the remaining 680 million, that is to fund our 1,000 homes commitment.
Supplementary question?
Thank you. Could the Cabinet member explain which estates are set to benefit from the £250 million investment in existing council housing stock?
So it's quite a vast programme, actually, and I've received asset management programme, and it's actually most of our estates will benefit in some form, but primarily it will be homes initially which did not receive the decent homes funding. So I should specify, for example, the Knoll Park estate didn't receive the funding that was allocated to the 227 pods that were on the estate. There'll be a little bit more detail that will be going into that more soon, and also estates like Turner Avenue, which didn't receive investment, as well as an estate called Imperial Wharf, which is not currently within the boundaries of Haringey. It's actually in Hackney, but it's an estate that we own, and it's in a pretty dire condition because it previously been taken out of the Decent Homes programme, and that estate will be receiving Decent Homes work over the will be in the initial phase. But also, just to reiterate, also some of the work that hadn't been done over the years on the Broadwater Farm estate in terms of Decent Homes work, that will also be in the initial investment.
Any more? No. Thank you. We move to the second question. Can I ask members to be brief if we want to, be able to arrive at motions? And if you don't need to have a supplementary question, please don't ask. Question number 2, Councillor Da Costa.
I'll try and speak fast. Does the leader regret moving an amendment to remove references to a people's vote and remaining in the EU from the Liberal Democrat motion to the full Council on Brexit?
No.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
Over the weekend, Jeremy Corbyn said he'd probably vote leave in another referendum, and Labour's abstention last week in Parliament. Will you be lobbying Jeremy Corbyn and all Labour MPs to support a people's vote with a right to remain?
I'd like to give you a one-word answer for that, but I won't. It's really important that whatever comes out of Westminster has the support of the people of this country. The country is divided. Brexit has divided country, divided families. It's divided, parts even of this chamber. I think it's really important that we look at what the options are and that everybody is comfortable with where we end up. I know what I'll be doing on Saturday.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Does the leader if I may sit down, does the leader still believe that a general election is the best option for Haringey residents, being held back by a number of years of Tory austerity?
Absolutely. The thing that will make most difference for people in Haringey and us as a council moving forward is to have a general election and to get a Labour government.
Question 3, Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Mayor. This is to Councillor Amin. How is the Fairness Commission progressing? Are you able to report on any of the interim findings to date?
Thanks, Councillor Sennett. The Fairness Commission is in the process of concluding its initial engagement phase. We've spoken to and received submissions from a whole load of residents, individuals and groups, schools, businesses, community sector organisations and many others. And we're very, very grateful to them for their time in engaging with us. Our interim report is being summarised at the moment and should be available in April. It will obviously go to the Commissioners first.
Thank you. What are the timescales for the final report?
Late autumn.
Any supplementary? No. We'll move to question 4. Councillor Morris.
Thank you. My question is to Councillor Hearn, and it's about transparency. Does the Cabinet member regret attempting to withhold so many of the Keep Britain Tidies reports on the state of Haringey's parks?
Thank you for asking me this question. I did not withhold any reports. It was purdah. So no, je ne regrette rien.
Any supplementary?
Since these reports have been published,
Councillor Morris. I didn't know where it came from.
Okay. I'm not quite as deep as the other councillor. So, on another point on transparency, I wondered if Councillor Hearn could clear up something else. The amendment Councillor Hearn is proposing on motion G suggests the administration has already been working on the workplace parking levy. Yet just a month ago, when it was proposed as part of this group's budget amendments, it was met with surprise. So what work has actually been done on the levy? Thank you.
I am told by my officers that a working group is being put up to do this work.
Thank you. Any supplementary? Yes.
Since these reports have been published, what has the Council done to rectify issues outlined in the reports?
I love it when my colleague asks me awkward questions in council. Anyway, we are the best of friends. We had red rating parks. We did not lose any green flags. We've been working very hard with Keep Britain Tidy to look at a way going forward that we can use all our skills and all their skills together. And I am absolutely committed to a much more transparent way of working. I really want to see ward councillors, the friends groups and officers work together on regular inspections and troubleshootings in all our parks, to have that dialogue together, to look at what can and can't be done together, to make sure that we're talking to the friends groups in particular, who I value hugely, though they do bite my bum a bit. And I think it's, it's fantastic to have them because we've got the most amazing parks. So that's what I am trying very hard to do, and I've already said to my officers everything is out there, and everything now is out there.
Councillor Moyet, question 5.
Yeah, question to Councillor Blake. What is the council doing to support young people growing up in Haringey?
Madam Mayor, thank you, Councillor Moyet. I'm just going to make a few points around this. My Cabinet colleague, Councillor Weston, I know, could say a lot more on the continued excellent performance of Haringey schools, which of course the Council supports, and I believe all of our secondary schools are rated good or above. That's correct, thumbs up. But I specifically, within that context, we're very aware as a Council in terms of the worsening situation, the concerning situation around serious youth violence, and we've just last week launched our Young People at Risk strategy, which went to our Cabinet and which was approved, and which will focus around support for those most vulnerable young people within our borough. And at the centre of this is our Haringey Community Gold partnership, part funded by the Mayor of London, which we launched 2 weeks ago and which we anticipate will support 2,000 young people aged between 10 and 21 who will benefit from the project. I also want to mention very briefly, and it relates, I think, to the excellent previous presentation around autism, around our work on exclusions and alternative provision. Councillor Berriman and myself visited the Footsteps Alternative Provision at the White Hart Lane Boxing Club opposite Woodside High School. And we had an excellent hour and a half there with staff and with pupils. And a number of pupils who were identified to us from staff who were possibly on the autism spectrum, who hadn't had their conditions diagnosed. I think links back to Councillor Ross's point. This is an absolutely key issue that we are absolutely focused on. And we're looking forward, I think, to taking forward the results of those reviews during the summer and feeding back both to Labour Group and obviously to full council, because clearly what's going on around school exclusions is of great concern. We had a public meeting in Tottenham with community safety officers organised, 120 people in Tottenham, many of whom active within the community, and school exclusions was the #1 issue that was raised. So we're absolutely focused around that. It's, in terms of what decisions that we take moving forward have to be for the benefit of our children, obviously working with school partners to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blake. What is the Council doing to combat wider causes of youth deprivation in Haringey?
Thank you, Councillor. I think one of the kind of key things I'm most proud of in terms of this administration has been the changes to the council tax system, which Councillor Berriman has led on, and I think means that 6,000 of some of our most impoverished families won't be receiving a council tax bill this April, and I think that's something that we can all unite around and applaud. We are, as I've mentioned, our youth at risk strategy, as well as a focus there around school exclusions. We're looking at issues around family support. We have a trailblazer with colleagues from Children and Adult Mental Health Services, where we're looking to develop earlier intervention and more work around earlier diagnosis, hopefully amongst primary school children. In terms of the root causes, I think the reality is, in terms of this government's unrelenting austerity and its impact on some of our poorest communities, you know, we're taking action, I think, to alleviate as much as we can, but quite clearly, I think it's been alluded to in the previous discussion, we need a change of government, we need a change of focus, because the point I keep raising is that austerity financially is costing us money. It's costing us money on all fronts. In terms of my portfolio, the cost of a murder in Wood Green, I think to health colleagues, police colleagues, that's excluding all the impact of family breakdown that it impacts on us in terms of these hugely expensive care packages, some of our most vulnerable young people, is in excess of £2 million. So we need a government that's not only socially has a heart, but economically has a brain, you know, and is going to take the action to basically alleviate all of the causes that are impacting in terms of our communities now, particularly around this whole crisis around youth violence, but can also work out the maths that is actually costing us a fortune.
Thank you. Do you have supplementary? No. Thank you. We move to the last question, question 6. Councillor Deniso, and I'm anxious not to take a long time, so we'll have the two motions left. Thank you.
To the Leader of the Council, does spending £6,700 on a video explaining that the Council is short of money represent good value for Council taxpayers?
Yes.
How would you explain to one of your constituents your choice to continue to spend £1 million on publicity and communications?
Well, I think there are two separate questions here. One, you talk about publicity, about how we communicate with residents. The other, you talk about a particular video, which is how we explain. One of the things that Councillor Blake mentioned earlier on is the fact that austerity is a political choice, which is, I'm sorry, you're shaking your head there. Austerity is a political choice which has been imposed on the people of Haringey, and it's costing us money. It's not saving money, it's costing money. And one of the reasons why we had to have this, get this video out, is to explain to people simply why we're taking the decisions that we're taking. Every year we consult with residents. Every year we talk to residents about why we're doing what we're doing and how we spend our money. As you're probably aware, a number of other councils also did videos, one of which was shown on BBC News. Hackney's video was on BBC News. I thought our video was better, but that's just my view of that. All right, but also Islington, amongst other councils, who have actually used this as a way to get out and communicate to people, because you can use it within social media, you can use it on the internet. It's about how we get out and communicate with people. I don't believe our communication budget is completely out of line with other boroughs. Not for example, like Lib Dem Sutton, for example, spends roughly about the same amount of money, and they've got roughly about the same amount of people as well. Ultimately, coming back to the video, the cost of the video is 3p per resident. I think that's good value.
Any supplementary? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the leader remind us which party gladly implemented the most brutal austerity in a generation into Haringey Council, which makes these videos necessary?
Point of order, not a supplementary, irrelevant.
Thank you. I think it's time to move to the motions. Let's leave it at that.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Madam Mayor, with respect, it was a question which was asked as a supplementary, and one of the issues that people keep talking about is austerity and whether or not we as a council are spending money appropriately. A three-word answer. Sorry? Three-word answer?
Three-word answer, Joe.
Well, that's not 3 words. Okay.
Not having people speaking across each other. Could you please one?
I think it is clear that the Conservatives were in league with the Liberal Democrats when austerity came in. I'm sorry, it's just one of those things that you guys don't want to hear.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the motions. We have 2 motions for consideration. First, I will ask Councillor Palmer to propose her motion. You have up to 5 minutes, and then we'll have a seconder, and we won't have discussion. We'll go straight to the vote because of the restriction of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am delighted to put forward this motion. I think, as you'll know, it's a topic that I've spoken about here on a number of occasions. It's something I'm really passionate about and something I've championed at my school, Lordship Lane. We consider ourselves very, very lucky that we now have our school street, and already I can see the huge difference it's making. But we are just one school in a really big borough. In the last few weeks, I've been inundated with requests from parents from other schools in Haringey and also local residents who live in the streets surrounding schools to ask how they get a school street or a no idling zone. And honestly, every story I've heard horrified me. Hopefully, you've had a chance to actually look at the video that we put together. There are children with asthma talking about how pollution makes their condition worse. The lollipop lady at Coleridge who has to wear a face mask every day. A little boy at the same school who demonstrated putting his jumper over his mouth to stop him from breathing in fumes. And a girl who talked about her friend having to leave their school because the pollution made her asthma so severe. The statistics back up their fears. Air pollution causes around 36,000 excess deaths per year in the UK. And in London, a staggering 240,000 children and young people have an asthma diagnosis. Every year, that proves fatal for about 8 to 12 children. One clinical study shows that children who were born in 2010 have already lost 2 years of their lives. And we've seen levels of nitrogen dioxide have been illegally high since 2010 in the vast majority of UK urban areas. The government's lost 3 court cases over the illegal levels of air pollution, and yet still authorities fail to act. In January this year, the Mayor of London described London's poor air quality as a public health emergency. In a statement, he said London's filthy air makes chronic illnesses worse. It shortens life expectancy and it damages lung development in children. I agree with him. This is an emergency, and it's one that demands action right now from this council. Our motion asks that at drop-off and pick-up times, the streets around schools should be car-free. At schools where that's not practical, we impose no idling zones. Both of those measures keep some of those noxious chemicals and exhaust fumes away from children. But if it's going to work, we need to give parents some alternatives to driving to school, so it becomes a really positive part of their day rather than a chore. In actual fact, parents who drive really don't enjoy the school run either. A recent survey showed that 32% said it was actually more stressful than doing their day job. If we enable more children to cycle or walk, it would also help to tackle another big public health crisis. A lack of physical activity amongst young people is a real issue. Only 1 in 5 boys and 1 in 6 girls get the 60 minutes of daily moderate exercise recommended by chief medical officers in the UK. Making walking and cycling more successful and a really practical option for people requires investment, and our motion calls for this council to revisit a workplace parking levy. And finally, I had hoped that this motion would find cross-party agreement. That is what members of the general public have asked for. It's what the parents who worked with me on this asked for. But unfortunately, this group will not accept the Labour amendments. It takes the specific actions and commitments we ask for, and it replaces them with a promise to reduce the report and continue work. Our children do not need vague promises. They need cleaner air, and they cannot afford to wait for it. Exposure to nitrogen oxide and other pollutants as a child leads to a lifetime of health problems, including conditions that can be fatal. Delaying implementing school streets and allowing children like those in the video that we sent round to grow up inhaling literal poison. We can protect them, but that requires us being bold and passing this motion unamended.
Councillor Cole Harrison to second the motion. Can you be very brief?
I can try. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Later this evening, there will be a further motion and debate on declaring a climate emergency in our borough. This can't come soon enough. As the Lib Dems have said many times in this chamber, we must take immediate action on the grave state of the world's climate and the toxic, illegal levels of pollution here and around the world for the sake of our economy, our health, our children's health and the future of our planet. And whilst I welcome that motion, unfortunately, without the Lib Dem amendments to it that ensure real change and real action, the recommendations put forward by Labour do absolutely nothing to tackle this issue right here, right now. We must take action today. That's why we have put forward this motion to introduce school streets and no idle zones at all primaries within this current administration, to specifically tackle one of the greatest daily attacks on our children's health without delay. This is not just putting forward a vague pledge, this is ensuring the Council takes real action right now. School streets are low-cost, low-entry ways to improve the air quality around where some of our youngest residents are at their most vulnerable and can be self-policed by schools if given sufficient backing by this Council. Where physical implementations are required, such as pop-up bollards or CCTV cameras to find motorists entering school streets within the assigned time zones, this can be funded by a workplace parking levy, as we put forward in this year's budget. As I said in my proposal for the levy in the last full council, the schemes are bringing in much-needed revenue to healthier methods of travel in cities such as Nottingham, the pioneers of the workplace parking levy in the UK. I find it very interesting that Labour's amendment suggests they would continue their work on a workplace parking levy when the whole proposal seemed completely alien to both officers and Labour councillors when we presented our budget amendment introducing it just a month ago. However, as predicted by myself back then, clearly on reflection, Labour councillors have reconsidered rejecting this idea and welcome our funding model. However, I cannot comprehend why they are unwilling to produce a feasibility study on it. Let's ensure that Haringey is leading by example in reducing these figures by ensuring our schools all have school streets. We enforce no idle zones, and we're tackling the air pollution crisis through real action out there where it really matters, not simply vague pledges on pieces of paper. Labour's amendment does nothing to make this happen and is simply a way of kicking the can down the road. Therefore, for our children's health now and in the future, I ask that you support this motion unamended.
Given the time available, I propose that we proceed to the amendment which has been received. Can I call on Councillor Hale to move the amendment? 3 minutes.
Thank you for bringing this motion. Nearly everything you've said so far in the chamber on this issue, I totally agree with. Our amendment seeks to add value, putting action behind statements. We can declare this, that and the other, but unless we find a way to actually do it through putting an action plan together, then it's useless. So we will review our work on school streets, as they've begun so far, and bring back a school streets action plan in March 2020. I don't think it's possible to do it before because we have to explore how we do this for each school. It won't be easy for some of them. Our active travel team, who are excellent, by the way, they recently won a fantastic award for the London Transport Awards on their walking and cycling festival in Finsbury Park called Saddle and Soul. They work really hard with schools and groups to try and support people to make the choices to leave the car behind and to walk, limp, roll, ride and make transport journeys across the city. Oops, I thought I lost my place. We will increase in spending on active travel in future budgets. Work is already underway on the workplace parking levy. It's actually already going ahead. There is a group looking at it. We will use this to fund active travel, cycling and school streets. It's a very good way of doing it. So I hope all councillors enjoy being part of the levy as well, because it will include you. Okay. We're already working with local business in Wood Green for greening up the area, that particular piece of regeneration, and will do so in future with others as well. I move the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor White to second the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try not to use all 3 of my minutes. On Saturday, I went to a walking and cycling conference where we heard evidence of the inverse relationship between car ownership and income. Basically, the poorer you are, the less likely you are to own a car. The richer you are, the more likely you are to own two. But on the other hand, it's clear that those on the lowest incomes are the worst affected by the pollution that's caused by cars, and poorer Londoners are far more likely to be killed or seriously injured on our roads than the richest. This means that reducing traffic and the associated pollution is really a social justice issue. When those who drive are statistically richer and those who get killed, hurt or poisoned by their machines are overwhelmingly poorer, any responsible government has to take action, national or local government that is. So we have to both change the culture and we have to take practical measures. We have to change the culture that accepts that those in the most powerful machines own the roads, have more right to be there. We also have to change the culture that accepts the kind of aggressive behaviour on the roads that puts people off walking and cycling. So we've got to change the culture. We've also got to take practical measures. In terms of practical measures, on Saturday we also heard from Councillor Clyde Lokes about the amazing improvements they've been able to make in Waltham Forest with the Mayor's funding for the Mini Holland project. They've managed to reduce rat running drastically by creating low-traffic neighbourhoods, and according to research by King's College, this has reduced pollution to such an extent that life expectancy has increased in Waltham Forest. So, I'm very happy to second this amendment. It's going to see us moving as fast as we possibly can to implement school streets in our borough, with the long-term aim of making them universal. I hope we can follow in the footsteps of Hackney, who have implemented 5 so far. I believe they're the London leaders on this, and they've got a commitment to implement another 12 by 2022. We're obviously following behind them, but I hope we can follow their lead. I'll finish by mentioning climate change, because hopefully we'll be getting onto the motion. We'll be discussing the global emergency we all face. We can't rely on individuals to change their own behaviour. We've got to act to create the conditions that enable people to change how they behave. Car journeys of under a mile, particularly the school run, are a huge contributor to carbon emissions. So we can really make a difference if we can enable every child across the borough to come to the school using active travel. So please support the amended motion.
All right, thank you. Can I call on Councillor Palmer to briefly respond?
Thank you. I will be as brief as I can. I'm not quite sure how else I can say this to you, quite frankly. We've seen thousands and thousands of young people across the world protesting on climate change. And you know what they're telling us? They're telling us to listen to the experts. And the experts are telling you that time is up. You do not have time to sit around creating action plans. Children need clean air right now. Okay, I'm going to leave the pointless political point scoring to you guys. Okay, but I genuinely want us to work together on doing this, and I think we can. So I'm going to call on you to set targets, clear targets, that we do through the Environmental and Community Safety Scrutiny Group. And we come back and we report on those. And we can go out together and we can tell Haringey what we are doing. And we can rival other boroughs like Hackney. But we cannot sit here anymore.
Now, we need to vote on the amendment. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is carried. Now we vote on the amended motion. Thank you. Those in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Those against? Abstain? No. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Then we come to the second motion. I ask Councillor Hen to propose her motion. 5 minutes.
Right. Just before she died, my mum, aged 89 and a half, sat up in her hospital bed and declared a climate emergency. She was a former science teacher. Climate change is a socialist issue, she said. The poor, those in low-lying developing countries, those whose voices we refuse to hear, are bearing the brunt of our folly. She then followed this message up with a science lesson, my heart sinking because I don't really understand science, all the way from her hospital bed. Clearly, the thousands of school children who went on strike on Friday to demand action against climate change also understand the science. Perhaps they have a science teacher as inspiring as my mum was. They agree with the UN, who warn that we have less than 12 years to stop catastrophic climate change. We are witnessing extreme weather, events and floods, heat waves, rising sea levels, and pollution causing ill health for millions. The world's poorest, who have done least to contribute to the climate breakdown, are often most impacted. But do we listen? No. We troll around in our gas-guzzling cars, stuffing the waters of the world chock full of plastic, which, unlike this planet, will never fall apart and die. The children, like my old mum, demand that we take action now. And that is exactly what we in Labour-run Haringey are doing. No one needs a car unless it's an access aid, yet the streets are lined with them. Children's lungs are clogged with the foul air in many parts of our city. The electric car is but one answer. The answer is to walk, roll, limp, cycle and ride public transport. That is why we are committed to livable neighbourhoods. Affluent people can afford to replace polluting cars. Poor people can't. That's why we must reduce car ownership in Haringey. Poorer people have older cars. For those who need them and can't afford to replace their own car, a scrappage scheme is vital. Affluent people can afford to heat their homes and own their homes and install less polluting boilers, insulation and solar panels. Poor people, many living in rented properties, can't. Wherever we live, whatever our circumstances.
Councillor Hearn, you're running out of time. Can you finish? You're running out of time.
Oh, sorry.
Can you finish, please?
I'll just quickly get to that. Was a quick 5 minutes. Okay. We must reduce the energy we use. I suggest we call a climate change emergency now. Oh, it took me a long time to do it.
Councillor Say, to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are many things we can do as a local authority to help the environment, and a lot of the time this starts with having the political will to do so. So I'm pleased to be seconding this motion this evening. So often the environment is an afterthought, low down in the list of priorities, and it shouldn't be. I have been shocked by how little we seem to care about the environment. I was brought up as a child on the Isle of Wight, so perhaps spending 10 formative years living in a small country town has connected me to the countryside in a way some of my colleagues are not, but we ignore the threats to the environment at our peril. As socialists, we have to recognise that there are conflicts. For example, some trade unionists fiercely defend the nuclear industry or the expansion of airports because of the jobs this represents. But the old capitalist idea of endless growth and expansion is currently being challenged as unsustainable, and surely there are as many jobs and arguably safer jobs in new green technologies. Reducing our carbon emissions is one way for us to make a contribution as a local authority, to join with other councils to show a way forward. And I've just heard that Haringey's Pensions Committee last Thursday agreed in principle to move our emerging markets equity holdings into a new low-carbon alternative, significantly reducing the fund's carbon footprint. One of my colleagues last week suggested what we are doing here is just micro-politics and as such doesn't matter very much. But I don't think that's correct. Lots of effective and groundbreaking campaigns and initiatives come from the grassroots up. And we have a very active local group here in the borough, the Hornsey and Wood Green Climate Change Action Group. I would like my grandchildren to enjoy the natural world as I and my friends and people of my generation have been able to. and I welcome the environmental campaigns being conducted by school children in defence of our planet. So I will finish by quoting Greta Thunberg, a committed activist, when she says, "I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear every day, and then I want you to act as if your house is on fire, because it is." Please support the motion.
Thank you. Given the time available, I propose that we proceed to the amendment which has been received. I call on Councillor Emery to move the amendment. Briefly, please.
That's right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Liberal Democrat Group would like to thank Friends of the Earth for encouraging councillors to bring and pass this motion. I would also like to thank the young members of the Environmental Group. Perhaps Councillor Hearn could involve them in future council decision-making. We agree there is a climate emergency. To give one example, millions of tonnes of methane, a greenhouse gas 34 times stronger than carbon dioxide that has been trapped in frozen tundra, is now being released as rising temperatures meet that tundra. Scientists were not aware of the effects of this and many other issues when the Paris Agreement was signed. Climate change is close to accelerating out of control. Our situation is more precarious than we realised, and old targets will not keep us safe. Given that we can't just settle for listing past achievements or setting goals for the future, this emergency demands action in the present. The amendment that I'm proposing tonight is a simple way to secure greater use of decentralised and renewable energy. It would require developers to make more use of renewable energy sources. This is an excellent time to enact this policy because renewable energy production is getting better fast. Developers would have a plethora of different ways of meeting this target: solar, wind, biomass, ground source heat pumps, and many others on or off-site. The price of solar panels in the last 10 years has dropped by 2/3. And as business, governments and universities wake up to the danger of climate change, the possibility of renewable money and research are pouring in. So the pace of improvement will only accelerate as we go on. In the interest of fairness, I should acknowledge the Council's local plan already asked developers to produce renewable energy locally. But given the emergency we face, it's time to make those requirements more specific and wide-reaching. While dealing with climate change will demand some radical reforms, what this amendment proposes is not among them. Other local authorities have already done it. Indeed, some of the wording you are voting on is lifted straight from their policies. Passing this amendment is a small step towards dealing with this climate emergency, but it is a meaningful one, and it's one that we can take today. Climate change is an emergency not only because it is serious, but because it is urgent. There is no time to waste before acting. So let's add some extra bite to this amendment, to this motion, and pass this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Hare to second the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In our recent carbon report, we say that since 2005 we decreased our carbon dioxide outputs by 32.4% compared with neighbouring boroughs 31.1% and Greater London 33.6%. Actually, if you want to say we're better than our neighbours, you must put errors against the figures and show a statistical test. We've got enough data to do that. In fact, we won't hit 40% by 2020, although London and the UK have both decreased by about 42%. So we're not the greenest, and we have to work really hard to be average. In 2008, this Council's Greenest Borough Strategy was published. Its big targets included preserve, improve and increase green spaces. However, we recently lost the majority of our parks' green flags. Recycling targets haven't been achieved, and cycling remains dangerous and almost unimproved since 2008. Yes, the Council has done many good things on the environment, and people outside, Ent Energy, Highgate Transition, Friends of the Earth, the Climate Forum and many others have done even more proportionate to their resources. I absolutely understand that changing cultures and the way we've got used to doing everything is really, really hard. There are big national and London carbon action plans, and we will have to work hard to play our part in those. And to add further changes to the background of change that those other plans will bring. We live in a world of make-believe. Kylie Jenner, one of the Kardashians, has become the youngest self-made billionaire ever. We have our own pouting publication, The People's People. Unfortunately, it just cost us money. Councillor Ejiofor is doing his best with his videos to emulate Kylie, but the benefits... but the benefits to council finances have yet to be materialised. It's what's done it. It's the unrealistic claims that lead me to criticise the council. It doesn't help us or the cause if we aren't realistic. Zero by 2050 was well outside the likely careers of anyone in this chamber. At a stroke, we now plan for zero by 2030. 2050 was a huge challenge. Bringing it forward to 10 years from now is, well, even more challenging. Our amendment aims to put some targets into the proposed change to our local plan. It's been done elsewhere and it could be done here too. You want to be ambitious, so do we. So do Friends of the Earth, who put the pressure on the council to play its part in stepping up the rate of change in Haringey. If you can't accept this, it's hard to see how the zero in 10 years has a ghost of a chance. I ask everyone here that our amendment be supported across the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Hand, briefly respond to the debate, please.
In the interest of time, thank you and no.
Okay, now we're first going to vote on the amendment. Those who agree with the amendment, raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? No? Yeah? Amendment is lost. Now we're voting for the motion. Those in favour? Yes, sorry. Yeah, it's amended.
Sorry, it's not.
It's not amended. This is a... Oh, you see...
The original motion.
Excuse me, blame the Chief Executive for that one. No, we're voting for the motion. Yeah? Original motion. Thank you. Against? Abstention? No. Finish. The motion is carried. Thank you so much. We come to the end of the business. 10 o'clock. Wow. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, he was on the top. Yeah.